All right, guys, I am doing this video off the cuff because this just came up either today. Actually, by the time this goes up, it would have come up. It would have come up yesterday, and that is from InsideTheMagic.net that Disney reportedly fires Rachel Zegler from Snow White live action remake. The only reason I'm talking about this is because everybody's apparently talking about this rumor like, oh, it confirms that Rachel Zegler has been fired from the live action Snow White. Well, I really hate to burst your bubble, but Rachel Zegler ain't getting fired from the live action Snow White remake. You know, I'm sorry to tell you, but hate to burst your bubble. And the biggest reason why I think it is because of this article from Forbes, and that is why Disney's Snow White remake must gross $340 million. This came out on September 21st, 2023. I'm not going to read the whole thing line for line because I don't need to, but the article brings up a very good point that Snow White, the live action remake of Snow White, actually got tax exemptions in the UK. Let me scroll down and find this real quick. Here we go. As we recently revealed in the Daily Mail newspaper, Disney has received a $41.1 million reimbursement for Snow White, bringing its net spending on the movie down to $168.2 million. Where was that paragraph initially? Yeah, like I said, guys, I'm doing this more off the cuff. But the reported budget was over $200 million for the live-action Snow White remake, but Disney did get a tax credit for, not a tax credit, a reimbursement of $41.1 million. The reason I feel that Rachel Zegler has not been fired from Disney's live-action Snow White remake is twofold. The first thing is obviously that tax reimbursement. I am no attorney and I have no knowledge of what is actually in the agreement. So take this with a grain of salt. I am merely just expressing my opinion here. In my opinion, part of the stipulation of the reimbursement is that the movie has to be released theatrically or released in some capacity. And if not, then that I would not be surprised if the stipulation for that $41.1 million reimbursement would be that if Disney were to take the tax write down, like Warner Brothers did with Batgirl, that Disney would have to pay all of that money back to the UK government. And not only that, probably would not get another reimbursement as the result of just taking the tax write down and still taking the government money in the process. The second reason I feel like Rachel Zegler is not going to be recast as Snow White is, simply put it, this is who Hollywood is pushing right now. This is who the major studios are pushing as the guy, the next big thing. And I'm gonna bring up a professional wrestling reference, but I think it's a good point because you can very easily apply it. In that audiences absolutely hate it when people in charge of these companies are trying to push to the audience that this is the guy. If you watch professional wrestling, Roman Reigns is one of the most hated champions of all time. He's constantly booed. You can constantly hear the Roman sucks chant if you watch SmackDown live or you watch the pay-per-views live. Typically, all that stuff gets edited out, but still, the guy gets constantly booed. Why? Because the WWE is constantly pushing him as this is the champion. You are going to get behind this guy. Wrestling fans absolutely hate that. Let the audience choose who the guy is going to be. Just like with movie stars, let the audience choose who the next big thing is going to be. Why are you pushing Rachel Zegler as hard as you are for simply starring in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, which bombed, by the way? Oh, but that was released during COVID. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, she was also in Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which bombed spectacularly, bombed so bad, in fact, that Warner Brothers had to rush that movie to digital, to premium VOD, stuff like Vudu and the Google Play Store, to recover at least recover some of their money back. She's also the same person that in a red carpet interview for Shazam! Fury of the Gods famously exclaimed that the only reason that she was in the movie was that she, quote unquote, needed a job, and stopped in the middle of the interview to publicly thank her manager and her agent. Now, the thing about actors taking roles for money is that's not uncommon. In fact, James Spader famously accepted the role of Dr. Daniel Jackson in 1994 Stargate only for the money, and he made no bones about that. But the difference between James Spader and Rachel Zegler is James Spader had a career going back to the 1980s. Stargate came out in 1994. Rachel Zegler was only 1 or 2 years into her career, and she just comes right out and says, "Oh, I'm only in Shazam! Fury of the Gods because I just needed the money and nothing more." So, if Rachel Zegler doesn't give a damn about Shazam! Fury of the Gods, why should the audience care? And that could spill over into that that new Hunger Games movie. I think it's Songbirds and Snakes. I'm not the biggest Hunger Games fan, and I know some people are going to come at me in the comments, but sorry, I am not that big a Hunger Games fan. But the point still stands. That could bleed over into the new Hunger Games movie, in that, okay, did she only do this just because she wanted the money and nothing more? That, once again, she doesn't have the clout to get away with making such statement. And I know I'm rambling, but let me bring it back to the point in that, Rachel Zegler is the quote unquote new movie star, right? They are pushing her so fucking hard that deciding to axe her from Snow White now, despite all the backlash, is just going to make everything infinitely worse. I think what Disney is honestly hoping for is that by the time that the movie releases, that the controversy kind of goes away, but just conveniently forget about the fact that we're doing a live action Snow White remake, but without the most iconic part of the movie, which is which were the dwarves, because Peter Dinklage got so upset about it that Disney decided, you know what? We're going to change Snow White and we're going to recast the most iconic part of the original 1937 movie, which were the dwarves. And not only that, we're just not going to have a prince in the movie at all because, according to Rachel Zegler, his scenes may get cut entirely because Snow White isn't going to be saved by the prince. So you're going to make a fairy tale that doesn't follow fairy tale tropes, and specifically you're going to make a Snow White movie without the dwarves. Why didn't you just make a new movie to begin with? Disney is way too deep in the controversy to just conveniently cancel this, to just recast Rachel Zegler at this point, because they already did that with Solo: A Star Wars Story. They fired Phil Lord and Christopher Miller when they were only 2 weeks away from finishing principal photography, and then they brought in Ron Howard and reshot 80% of the movie. So they basically paid for 2 movies but only got one. And Solo famously bombed. So Disney probably doesn't want another Solo on their hands, and basically, let's just put out this live-action Snow White remake and just hope it makes some money back, and hopefully some of the controversy will dissipate by the time the movie releases. But upon a closer examination, the entire logic falls apart when you realize that The Flash bombed spectacularly because of all of the Ezra Miller controversies, right? Batgirl, a movie that reportedly was 95% complete, got canceled because it would, quote unquote, cause brand damage. But we're going to release The Flash with Ezra Miller despite him choking out a woman in Iceland on video, threatening the KKK on video, and then being arrested in Hawaii, I think twice. I know twice. There may have been a third time, but I know he was arrested in Hawaii twice. But let's still release The Flash despite the Ezra Miller controversy. Another thing about recasting Rachel Zegler this late in the game for the live action Snow White remake is that not only filmmakers but executives, if they actually went through with this plan and fired Rachel Zegler from the live action Snow White remake, they would basically have to admit that they did wrong. They would have to admit defeat. And the thing that we know about people with really big egos is that people with really big egos can never admit when they're wrong. So at this point, they're just going to stick the course because, like I brought up, she is the quote-unquote new movie star that they're pushing, and they don't want to come out and publicly fire her from the live-action Snow White remake because that would admit defeat. And like I just brought up a couple seconds ago, people with really big egos will never, ever admit that they're wrong. And guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this right here because I know I have rambled on way longer than I probably should have. If you stuck around this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me long enough, you know I'm terrible at ending these videos, especially these unscripted videos. So I will just see you guys next time.